So, Bill Robertie's books, How to Play the Opening in Backgammon. There are 3 books, there's 5 chapters in each book, and we're on to chapter 5 of the first book. So, the final chapter in book 1, which looks at the 4-point and things that you can do with the 4-point. Again, this will be quite a reasonably long video, I'm afraid, but at least it lets us cover the chapter in one video. So, he starts off by looking at making a decision whether to make the 4-point or to hit. And he, as usual, has a number of factors to bear in mind. And if you've watched some of the previous videos, they'll be very familiar to you. So for instance, who's the stronger board? And if we have the stronger board, a hit is slightly more effective. Crucially, that one I've kind of highlighted in white font there. How many checkers does your opponent have back? If your opponent has escaped a checker, you're far more likely to want to hit and try and send another checker back. If the opponent has checkers back, there's less urgency to do so. Does hitting cause you to leave lots of blots lying around the place? Have you made your 5-point? In which case, making the 4-point creates what the position that's known as the rack, the 6, the 5, and the 4-point. Very good blocking combination of checkers. Have you escaped a checker? In which case, you probably want to consolidate and make the 4-point. Or do you have an anchor? In which case, if we have an anchor, making the 4-point prevents our opponent making as good an anchor. And then, to a lesser extent than with some other points, the race is how are we doing in the race? Are we does hitting allow us to come back into the race? It's less important with the 4-point as it happens, but it applies. As usual, Bill has come up with a number of factors to consider, and as usual, I find that too many to work with. So I've tried to, as I've going through all the positions and studying this chapter, I'm trying to break it down into what's workable for me. So for me, I've come up with just a slightly different rule based on all those factors, which is just this. You should always make the 4-point. If you can have a choice between making the 4-point or hitting, always make the 4-point, unless there are overwhelming contact advantages before hitting. In other words, before hitting, if we have contact advantage before hitting, means we have a stronger board, or after hitting. So in other words, we've put a checker back behind our attack. There's 2 key words in there. One is overwhelming. A slight contact advantage is not going to make it worthwhile. You make the 4-point. And secondly, it's something I had to kind of work out as I was kind of going through this chapter. We're looking at contact, the chances of hitting and blocking, not racing advantages. Obviously, if we hit, we'll have a racing advantage. But if there's overwhelming contact advantages, we might hit. But otherwise, we always make the 4-point. And I've kind of gone through all Bill Robertie's positions and a lot of other positions I've kind of tried with, and this little rule of thumb that I've come up with works really, really well. So here's an example here where we've rolled 2-2. I'm not going to go through the workings of every position just to save time, but I am going to do this one. We've rolled double 2s. We've one checker of the bar, so we bring that in, and then we're going to take one of the checkers on our 24-point, and we wouldn't do it in this order, but whatever we choose to do, that's going to be the final use of the 2, but with 2 more 2s to play. And the choice really is between playing 2 down from 6 to 4 and making our 4-point, or we put them back and playing 13 to 9 and hitting. So we're choosing between the hit and the making the 4-point. And I just remind you of my rule. Are there overwhelming contact advantages to hitting as we just have done there? That's, the biggest thing we're going to kind of bear in mind when deciding whether to hit or make the 4-point. And here, if you look at the outcome here, we really haven't got any contact advantages. We haven't got a point on our home board. Black is the stronger board. We've left 4 blocks lying around, which are vulnerable to being hit back, even if not in the next go, in some future go. So it's hitting is just it's just not causing us any great long-term advantage here. And instead, we make the long-term asset of the 4-point. That was the other option we could do, and that's the right move. Without the contact advantage, make the 4-point as we do there. And as you can see there, hitting, it's not a disastrous 54 millipoint error. It's not disastrous, but the long-term asset prevails when there's no contact advantage. Here's a similar position here. If you look down the bottom there, we could hit with 13 to 7 and then probably play 13 to 9 with the other checker. But we don't have the better board, so we haven't got a stronger contact position in the first place. We do have quite an attack there. But we're also very vulnerable to being hit back. If we played 13 to 7, there's no way of covering that. So If black rolls a 6 in the bar, they hit us back straight away, and we're kind of into a much weaker position. So we don't have a stronger contact advantage. So what are we going to do? We're going to make the 4 points. So we can play 10 to 4 and 8 to 4 and make the 4 point. We wouldn't hit there because contact is not in our favor. We just make the long term asset instead. Now take this position here where black has got a checker on the 13 point. We have the stronger board now, so we do have a contact advantage here. With choice really here between hitting 13 to 11 or, we could hit with the 4 and the 2 and play from our anchor 20, from our 20 point to our 14 point. But the key to this is we weaken our contact values. If we break our anchor, we're far weaker contact values. If we break our midpoint by hitting 13 to 11, we far weaker contact values. So hitting here, yes, it gives, again, the distinction. It gives us a racing advantage to hit, but it causes us to break a key point. And as I said, you'd break the midpoint before you'd break the anchor. So the right thing to do is just make our 4 point as before. Anything else is now getting into significant error territory. So when do we, hit? Is it always make the 4 point? Well, here's the situation here. Look at what's happened down the bottom here. Black has escaped a black checker. They rolled 6 to 4. They haven't escaped a black checker. We were started with a 3-1. Black got a 6-4 and ran their back checker. They've nearly escaped it. And if we let that checker, if we didn't have another go, we lose all contact with that checker. So there is a huge contact gain to hitting with 13 to 11 here. We have the stronger board. So in terms of contact, we're in the stronger position already. And by hitting, we'll put the second checker back behind our attack, which we really want to do that. And so for that reason, we just have to hit. And even in fact, if we were to hit with 13 to 11 and then play 24 to 20, we're very unlikely to be hit back unless black rolls doublets. We're pretty safe from being hit back as well. So look at it here. All the top choices involve playing 13 to 11 and hitting, and it's a very big 270 millipoint blunder to make our 4 point. The reason being, we simply cannot allow that checker to escape. We have to hit it and send it back to maintain as much contact as possible. Here's another example where we might want to think about it, what we want to do. Our weakness here is, you look in our home board on the bottom right quadrant, we have a blot on our 4 point. And if we hit black, they're going to have a free shot at that. However, as Bill Robertie says, the strongest single factor that favours hitting is to prevent our opponent escaping all their back checkers. If we, it's not guaranteed that black won't leave us a shot next go. And if we had to do a holding game from our bar point, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But we're far better off trying to maintain contact. So for that reason, we simply cannot not hit black. Black's checker on our 11 point there in the bottom left quadrant, the blot there, we've got to hit it with 13 to 11. And then our best move really is just bring another checker down to the 13 point to try and improve our chances. If black doesn't roll a 4 in the next go and doesn't hit us our blot on our 4 point, well, by bringing another checker down 13 to 8, it gives us a better chance of covering that. And that's the right move. Now, I said I wasn't going to show the workings of all the moves, but I'm going to show you workings of two positions here. Both of them involve us playing a 2-2. Both of them I found tricky. We obviously, in this first one here, we've got to play one of the twos to bring a checker in off the bar, and then we can make our 8 point by playing 8 to 4 and 6 to 4 and make it like that. Not a great flexibility down the bottom of those strip points, but that's definitely an option. Or, we can come in from the bar and then attack and hit at the top there. And the question is, and the final, the safest thing to do then is just to play 18 to 16 with the last of the twos. And this is the interesting point that I wasn't sure what to do here, and I probably would have made the 4 point because I didn't see this overwhelming contact advantage. But Bill Robertie says, look, we've got the 3 point, and it's a pretty crappy point, but even a crappy 2 point board gives us a contact advantage, and it helps us in a hitting exchange. So for that reason, Bill Robertie says, no, we do hit. We have the advantage. It's enough to spell the difference. That having our 3 point is enough to make the difference between hitting and not hitting, and hitting the right move. But if you take that position there and look down the bottom right quadrant, and we have the 3 point. If we give a slightly different position and we don't have our 3 point, but something very similar, again, we can come in with the 2, and then we have the choice. We can go on and hit that position there. But do we have an advantage in the contact game now? No, we just don't. We haven't a single point made in our home board, so we're not stopping black coming in. But look at as well up the top there. Black will hit us with a 1, with a 2, with a 4, with a 6. In terms of contact, black is hugely a lot of really good chances to hit us back there. Bill Robertie says this is a tricky position because there are not a lot of cues to lead. He couldn't say he found this the trickiest position because there weren't a lot of his factors coming back and forth. But if you think of it in terms of contact advantage, we have no, and my rule of thumb, we have no contact advantage here. So we, instead of hitting, we'll just go back to the start there, we come in all right, we're better off just making the 4 point and even bringing in another checker, a builder down to the 13 point. Just gives us a nice flexible position. You might, what Bill Robertie says is over the board, black might elect to hit here because it gains ground the race, and making the 4 point there will allow black to make a point of their own. Black is likely to make a point of their own in the next go. But just stick to my rule because it just seems to work that if we haven't got a contact advantage, give yourself the long-term asset instead. Make the 4 point. If we have a contact advantage, yes, we're going to hit. And therefore, again, you can see making the 4 point is the right move. The next section Bill Robertie looks at is whether you should make the 4 point or double hit. And he actually breaks this into 2 categories and 2 distinct cases which divide very neatly. It really depends on whether the double hit involves your opponent has left a blot on your 4 point. So this is the first case. He divides into 2 cases, he calls them. One is where your opponent's left a blot on your 4 point and you're trying to decide whether you hit that blot and cover it or whether you hit that blot and hit loose somewhere else as well and kind of leave that blot of your own on your 4 point. And there's a very simple rule for this. You should always make the 4 point unless the second blot is on a really crucial point. And I'll show you what I mean by this. So here's the situation here. If you look at this position here, you see in our 4 point down the bottom right quadrant, we can make that. Probably best to make it playing 8-4. And the question is then on our 11 point, should we hit or not? So we can play the 8-4. Do we hit from 13 to 11 or do we play 6-4 to hit? Hitting the 11 point is good. I mean, it's a good racing advantage. However, it's just not as good as making the 4 point. And so that's the simple rule to follow. That's what we should do. Similarly here, again, we can hit on our 4 point with playing 6-4 and offload the 6 point. Should we hit up the top there, playing 18-14? Absolutely not. Make the 4 point. Plus the other attraction of that in that particular position is it tidies up the blot on our 8 point as well. But look at this situation here. We can play safe here. We can hit 8-4 and cover 7-4. We've made our 4 point. Surely that's good. But look up at the top right quadrant, and black has slotted their 5 point, our golden anchor, 20 point. And we want to fight for that point. So there's actually 13 numbers that black can roll next go that will allow them to come in and to make that point. And then if we do that, the game's sort of equal. In fact, they've got a slightly better point. They've their 5 point. We've only got our 4 point. So we just can't let them do that. So after we've hit with the 8-4, we're just better off double hitting. Send them back. Yes, we leave them a direct shot in our 4 point, but we just have to compete for the golden anchor every bit as much as for our home board points. And that's why it's the right thing to do. He also gives another couple of examples, which we've covered already, really, in terms of, we did this with the opening response rolls. How do you play a double 2 here? Well, we're going to hit with 24-20, but do we keep going and trundle it further and hitting the 16 point as well? No, his point is that 16 is he called it an inconsequential point. But if you remember back when we did the opening response rolls, If you roll double twos and you haven't made your 4 point, it is always going to be right to play 2 down from 6 to 4 and make your 4 point as well. So here you're going to hit up the top right quadrant with 24 to 20, but you're also going to make your 4 point every single time. And the other example he gives here is again where we're going to come in off the bar, we're going to hit, coming off the bar automatically hits. Do we come play 13 to 9 and hit again? No. Always, if you can, I cannot say it enough, and I remember saying it in the open response video as well. If you can offload with double twos, if you can offload from 6 to 4 with 2 of your checkers and make your 4 point, it's always going to be the right thing to do. So that's what we do. We come in off the bar, hit, but we make our 4 point rather than playing 13 to 9. The other option is where our opponent hasn't left gotten the 4 point, and we can make it without hitting anything else. Or we can hit 2 blocks elsewhere on the board. And again, it's lovely to have. There's a very clear rule of thumb here. It's never wrong to double hit instead of making the 4 point. I'm going to show you an example where it's not 100% right, but it's the safest option is double hit. It's just so effective. Puts 2 checkers in the bar, and let me give you one of the examples he gives here. We could play 9 to 4 and 6 to 4 and make our 4 point here if we wanted down the bottom right. Or we can hit. We can play 9 to 7 and hit, and then we can double hit by playing 6 to 1. And the great attraction of this is we offload one of we unstack our 6 point as well. So making the 4 point gives Black their entire roll the next go with loads. There's loads of things Black can do well the next go. They can. A 6 will let them anchor, 3s will let them hit, 1s will let them hit loose and slot in their 5 point. There's so much, if we were to play safe and make our 4 point, that Black can do. So we've got a hit, we've got a double hit, and it's the right thing to do. And finally, in this section, Bill Robertie gives this position here where the way he puts it, he said, this is probably the least attractive situation for a double hit here, because it leaves a direct return, it doesn't gain much in the race, it doesn't unstack our 6 point. This is we play 9 to 7 and then 7 on to 2, and it doesn't leave our bar point slotted. So there's not much advantage to double hitting here, and making the 4 point is tidy. So playing 9 to 4 and 6 to 4 is actually slightly the right option. But look at it here, it's not a disastrous error. So handy rule of thumb is if you can make the 4 point or you can double hit around the board, double hitting is just so powerful. That's what we should do. The third section in this chapter looks at whether we should make the 4 point or whether we should make a good anchor in our opponent's home board. And there's 2 anchors he looks at. He looks at an anchor on the 21 point, so on our opponent's 4 point, or an anchor on the 18 point. So let's start with the 21 point. And he comes up with this kind of a set of rules that actually are quite understandable, I think, and quite intuitive. So if our opponent's already made a good anchor, we want to match a good anchor with an anchor of our own, so we make the 21 point. If our opponent has made their 5 point, well, then the 21 point is the best anchor we're going to get. So if we can make it, we should grab it while we can. And thirdly, if our opponent is threatening, if they have lots of builders and a good attacking structure and they're threatening to come in on top of us, well, let's again anchor up and neutralize that potential. On the other hand, if our opponent still has 2 checkers back, well, look, the 4 point is a good blocking point to block them in. If our attacking structure is weak, well, look, we can make the 4 point and it starts to build an attack. It's kind of, at least it gives a bit of an attacking foothold. So we need to weigh up those 2 sets of competing factors. But it's a little bit more straightforward sometimes than when Bill Robertie will give you kind of 9 different factors, bear in mind. They kind of tally quite well together. So let's start with this one. This is quite an easy one. So we've rolled double twos. We have 2 checkers in the bar. So the first 2 twos we're going to roll is going to get in off the bar. But what do we do now? We can make our 4 point down the bottom right there, or we can advance those 2 that we brought into our 21 point. Well, look at it here. Black is anchored up on our 5 point. So as a result, if we were to make our 4 point, it's no value as a blocking point. But on the other hand, if we were to play and make our 21 point anchor here, it really stops, it neutralizes any attack and growing attack from Black as well. It gives us a good strong foothold and we can move from there. So making the 21 point here is clearly right, as you can see. And here's another fairly straightforward position. Again, we've come one checker to bring in from the bar. Um, which would you do if you want to pause and think about it? But it's another one where making the 21 points is an obvious winner. Yes, we've checkers on the 6 point that we might like to unstack, but Black has a lot of builders out there in their outfield that they could start to block us in. They've made their 5 point, so the best anchor we can make is our 21 point. So let's do that. The right role is that we build our anchor on the 21 point, and with the final two, we can play 13 to 11 and safety up that block on the 11 point as well as a nice little bonus. And that there again there's a correct move. Looks like it's a blunder there down the very bottom to have made our 4 point. But what about this situation? This situation is different here in two big ways. Black has two back checkers instead of one, and they haven't made a pointed inner board. And in fact, they lack builders in the outfield. You can say it's different in three ways, because not only have they not made an inner board point, but they lack the builders they had in the last round. And for this reason, particularly the fact that Black has two checkers back, the blocking point is much more useful. And the changes in Black structure all indicate that the advanced anchor isn't necessary either. So this time we make our 4 point. It's just much more straightforward. How about this? This is an interesting combination of things we can do. Bill Robertie would say this is the hardest question he gives. So again, if you want to pause it and see what you do, and then assuming you've unpaused it, the big thing that Bill Robertie says here is look at the number of blots that Black has lying around the place there. So if Black has 4 blots, so it's very possible we'll get a shot. We'll hit a black blot in the next go. And were we to do that, well, we want the strongest inner board we can. So we'll come in with the 20 bar to 23. We'll then make our 4 point with playing 2 down from the 6 to the 4 point. Unstacking is very nice as well. And then the best thing to do with the last one is just to play 8 to 6, because just as we want to attack our opponent's blots, the fewer we can leave them, the better in terms of them hitting us back. We could play 18 to 16, Bill Robertie notes, but we quite like having an anchor on our bar point. So leaving that there, if Black doesn't hit us on our 18 point, gives us a chance to make our bar point anchor, which would be very handy as well. The other situation is when we can play and make our 4 point or make our 18 point. And there's a huge difference here that you wouldn't expect. And the difference is this: which is better, a 21 point anchor or an 18 point anchor? And the answer is the 18 point anchor is substantially better. It's a much better anchor because it can't be blocked by any sort of prime. It gives us straight access to the outfield. We know about the golden anchor being on our 20 point. The second best anchor is our 18 point. So it's a much more powerful anchor than our 21 point. And for that reason, the good news is there's a very simple rule. If we can choose between making the 18 point or the 4 point, we always make the 18 point. The only time you wouldn't make the 18 point is if you can make the 4 point while hitting your opponent. So most people know that expression, to make a point on your opponent's head. Basically means to hit. If your opponent has left a blot on your 4 point, we hit that blot and then cover it. That's the only time we'd make the 4 point. Otherwise, every single time we should, if we have the choice between the two, we make the 18 point. So that's a lovely rule. The power of the 18 point makes it a very simple decision for us. So here's a few examples here. We have a 6-2 to play. We could make our 4 point here. If we were to do so, it's a huge blunder, an absolute stonker of a blunder. Instead, we make our 18 point anchor, and then 13 to 11 brings another builder into play. Yeah, Black has a few shots. I think it's about 7 rolls that might hit us, but generally we've got a nice anchor and huge building potential for the future. And instead, look, making our 4 point isn't even considered an option there because it's such a blunder. Here's one where it's slightly less of a blunder, only because Black has a weaker board here. In the last one, they had made their 5 point. Now they've only made their 3 point. but still clearly the right thing to do. The other problem with this for us is that we have to use our entire roll to make our 18 point, but it's still the right thing to do. It's such a powerful anchor, and again, making our 4 point is less of a blunder, but still a blunder. Um, here's he just took this example finally to say, well, look, it shows the power of the 5 point. This has nothing to do with making the 18 point or the 4 point. He just said, look, that was the position we had. But if we took exactly the same position, but instead of rolling a 4-2, we rolled a 5-1, now we can make the 5 point. So we pass up on the 18 point anchor for making our 5 point. And he said, look, it's just an interesting example of why, of the power of the 5 point. So now we come to the very final section of this chapter, and it's a question of, should we make our 4 point at the expense of having to break our 8 point? And he comes up with a kind of a nice series of rules that's quite straightforward. First of all, worth noting, he says that making the 4 point is going to be right more often than not. Not necessarily a default play, but if in doubt, make the 4 point, even at the expense of breaking the 8 point. Definitely, the 2 yellow bullet points there. If you can make the 4 point by hitting a blot, it'll always be right. And if you can make the 4 point and your opponent will only have an indirect shot at your 8 point, if they're anchored on their 24 point, it'll always be right to make the 4 point. In fact, very often if they've split, they'll have a direct shot, so it becomes trickier. But if they haven't split their back checkers and they're stuck on the 24 point, it's always correct to make the 4 point at the expense of your 8 point. And then the smaller ones in white that I just added in there, 3 other factors he says to consider. Does your opponent have an anchor? Because if they have an anchor, the value of your 4 points drops a lot. Like if they have an anchor on their bar, on our bar point or on our 5 point, well, I'm going to show you an example shortly. We're going to be making the 4 point behind them, so that's a bit pointless. But even if they're anchored on their 3 point, making the 4 point only slightly improves our blocking potential. He also says, think about what numbers your opponent needs to hit you. And here's an interesting number. He says, if he needs a 5 to hit, the value of making the 4 point goes down, because if he hits with a 5 in your 8, there's very little creative 5s for your opponent to use on the far side of the board. So it's just to have a look at what number does your opponent hit. If your opponent needs a 6 or a 3 or a 1, they've usually got much more options to use that on the far side of the board. And also just consider, is there a better thing to do? So plan B, is there a good plan B? If there's no good plan B, sometimes you'll stick with the 4 point. So now, very quickly, here we go. Here's an example where we can break our 8 point. We can play 8-4 and 7-4 and make our 4 point by hitting. We said that's the right thing to do. We should, even though it's messy, even though there's an awful lot of kind of blots left lying around, it's the right thing to do. The power of hitting just makes it so important. Here's a situation where, look at where our opponent has an advanced anchor. We could play and make our 4 point down the bottom right quadrant there, but there isn't a black blot there to be blocked at all, so absolutely no point. And instead, we're just going to do a split and down play is better, as just splitting down is just the right thing to do. What about this? Our opponent has made their 3 point anchor. We could make our 4 point, give them the rack, but in fact, our 4 point doesn't serve much blocking purpose here. Our 8 point is actually more effective. So we wouldn't ruin our 8 point or our block just to make our 4 point, and instead the split and down play again is just the right thing to do. Here's a different situation though. Here he says, look, here we've made our 5 point. You know by now, if you're watching any of these videos or know much about backgammon, when you have the 6 point, the 5 point, and the 4 point, it's called the rack. We can make the rack here. The cost is that our opponent will have a direct shot at us on the far side of the board, but it's still very much the right thing to do. And Bill Robertie notes that it's not just the right thing to do, but one thing is that our opponent is a direct shot with a 6, but if you go back to that position, 6 is played very well for our opponent on the far side of the board anyway, so that there's no particular risk with that one. He then asks, well, look, that last position we had made our 5 point, and making the 4 point made us a little bit stronger. Now we've only made our 3 point. It's not as strong a blocking point. He says, should that make us less or more keen to make our 4 point? The answer is actually it makes us more keen, because when we had our 5 point, we were strong, and our making our 4 point made us a little bit stronger. At the moment, we're not strong at all. We've only got a kind of a rubbishy 3 point. It's not that big deal at all. But, and this is something that Mark Olson is strong as well, is if you can have 3 points between your 3, 4, 5, and 6, if you get three of them, you're starting to be very strong. So if we make our 4 point here, we're suddenly much stronger. We have a 3 point board. Our opponent doesn't have any other points made in their home board. So for that reason, even at the expense of leaving a direct shot with a 6 for our opponent, and you can see here again, look at numbers. That's the far side. 6-1 would play well for our opponent. 6-2, 6-5 would play very well for our opponent. So for this reason, yeah, we leave our opponent a shot, but 6s are going to be good anyway. And so even though we've only made a 3 point, making our 4 point becomes a very much the right thing to do. And finally, I just thought I'd include this last example here. This is an example of making the 4 point as a default. There's nothing really good here to do. We've made our 3 point. Black has kind of split to their 5. We can't hit. We could do a split and down move, but it leaves lots of blots lying around. We could play 24-18, but gives Black would have fantastic diversification to be able to hit us back. It's not really good to do here. So as a default, we make the 4 point, and it's just an example of it. If you have to think about, do you break the 8 point to make the 4 point? If there's no good plan B, just do it, is the right thing. So finally, and I'm sorry, this has been another long video, but again, I just want to do this chapter in one go. We have come to, ladies and gentlemen, to the end of Bill Robertie's book 1. I'm holding my copy of it in my hand. It's torn at the seam. It's riddled with ink and ruler marks and pencil notes throughout it. My copy is absolutely exhausted, but I've really enjoyed it. And the good news is, I'll be coming back shortly, because that is the final chapter in How to Play the Opening in Backgammon Part 1. Shortly there'll be videos coming on How to Play the Opening in Backgammon Part 2, where he deals with a range of he does a couple of other points and then some other useful concepts, and I'll be launching into those videos soon.